The next point is one that has come into fashion massively since Tony Blair started using it. It's the idea of the growth of the office of Number 10 Downing Street as a policy unit in itself. Now, the difference between the Prime Minister and the rest of the Cabinet Ministers is the Prime Minister doesn't have a civil service department at his disposal. This means that he tends to lack the data and the information that you can use to fight the Whitehall battles and dominate the policy process. And so Tony Blair really didn't like this. So he sought to gain a bit of control over this by increasing the amount of office staff working in Number 10, actually delivering information to him personally so that he could make policy without the cabinet. Now, key members of this were his Chief of Staff, Jonathan Powell, and his Director of Communications, Alistair Campbell. Those two key people were able to control the stream of information going in and out of Tony Blair. And a lot of the decisions made in the sofa in Number 10, hence the term sofa government. So the difference between having these what we call special advisors advising you rather than the civil service is that the civil service will advise in a completely neutral way. Special advisors can provide advice, but they can also say, this will be the political impact of that, so this might be good for an election. And civil servants can't do that. Civil servants are not allowed to help the Conservative Party win the next election or the Labour Party win the next election, but special advisors are. And that's why sometimes Prime Ministers and Ministers prefer using their special advisors. So there is that resentment between special advisors and the civil service over that role. So it's... It was a pledge by David Cameron that they were going to cut the bill for special advisors, but actually they had to increase it because the fact of the matter is that the special advisors were needed to try and help reconcile Liberal Democrat and Conservative policy in coalition. So David Cameron's key men early on were Andy Coulson and Steve Hilton. Now, it's interesting how both of those fell out of favour. Andy Coulson obviously got tied up in the news hacking scandal. Steve Hilton sort of fell out with Jeremy Hayward, the cabinet secretary, and sort of his big society policy sort of went out of fashion. So David Cameron, moving into the 2015 election, he had two key special advisors, Ed Llewellyn, Chief of Staff, and Craig Oliver, Director of Communications, and they were the equivalent of Powell and Campbell. And David Cameron, using those key special advisors, and again, George Osborne had a guy called Rupert Harrison, who's a key economic policy advisor, who were able to help Cameron and Osborne come up with their austerity package, Plan A it was called, and deliver that in a political form. And so increasingly there you see the policy being directed by these special advisors in these tight-knit groups. And Number 10 Downing Street with these special advisors, all the while ignoring the cabinet as a discussion body. And Theresa May, now she's the Prime Minister, she also has two key special advisors, Fiona Hill and Nick Timothy. And we've seen some articles coming out in the Times and also in The Guardian about the way that Hill especially is upsetting quite a lot of the ministers, because May has got her literally like a sort of a hawk down on all the cabinet ministers, making sure that they're on message and making sure that they're not saying anything in public, which is not what Theresa May wants them to say. And so Theresa May, very, very tight on her cabinet. It looks like she's running quite a sort of Thatcherite style of prime ministerial government. Interesting to see how that develops.